Hello, Nasdaq followers. Welcome to another edition of Trade Talks. I'm your host, Lyanne Alfaro, filling in for Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter here at Nasdaq. Joining me today to talk a little bit about building generational wealth is Ramona Ortega, who's CEO of the fintech platform My Money, My Future. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So let's start by talking a little bit more about generational wealth and how do we build it?
Absolutely. So there was a recent report that was just put out talking about the impact of the Latino economy. And there were some really great stats. We're growing in terms of buying power. We are, generally making more money. We're building businesses. One of the things that stands out, though, is that we still have a persistent racial wealth gap. So right now, the last numbers that we're seeing, it's about $150,000 disparity between Latino families and white families in net worth. And that has an impact, obviously, on long-term GDP for this country. For example, the McKinsey report was just put out that looks at sort of the long-term effects of the racial wealth gap, and it's looking at, over $1 trillion. And so one of the things that we focus on at My Money, My Future is really building legacies, building intergenerational wealth. And the opportunity is huge for Latino families, particularly in this generation where 32% of Latinos are under the age of 18. So you have some time to build wealth. We also have the next generation of wealth that's going to be transferred. Some people are saying that it's trillions of dollars that baby boomers are going to be transferring. And I think for a lot of people, particularly for communities of color that have been overlooked or underserved, this is a huge opportunity to leverage those dollars. For the first time, a family might be receiving some kind of a wealth transfer. And so we want to make sure that people are prepared so that they have the tools and resources that they need to then take that money and grow it.
And that's what My Money, My Future does, right?
Correct.
It provides, and may I add at no cost, these kind of resources to level up and start preparing, having those conversations with your family right now.
Exactly.
Now, you talked a little bit about the Latino population in particular, and I want to bring that back up because just a few weeks ago, a report was dropped that said that the Latino GDP now represents $2.3 trillion and is growing at a clip that's more than 20% faster than the rest of the US economy. So that's pretty huge. And so now it's about saying, how can we actually take agency and create that wealth for our future? So let's talk a little bit more about those tools by which we do that.
Absolutely. So the first thing is get started, right? I think that Latinos and African American communities, we've heard this a lot. We save money, right? So we make our dollar like stretch. We know how to sort of build with very little, right? And so that's great. But now it's time to start investing. And so we always say, one, it's not how long you invest, or it's not how much you invest. It's how long you invest. And I think that's a really important point. So if you are 18, you need to start opening up an IRA account, particularly a Roth account, right? So this is a great starter account. So understand the kinds of opportunities and options that you have. If you have a job that has a 401k, make sure you are taking the match. Ask about the match. We want to make sure that people understand the difference between a low yield savings account and a high yield savings account. If you are saving for a home, and you have a $10,000 or more, it shouldn't just be sitting in a savings account. Maybe think about putting that into a CD or a high yield account. So that's the first level, I think, in terms of taking action. The next is really understanding diversification, both inside your portfolio, and what that means if you have a 401k, making sure that you are taking enough risk so that you can reap reward. Particularly for young folks. There's a lot of time. The market's going to go up and down, but over the time, it's going to smooth. And so hopefully, we've seen some decent returns, 8 to 12%. Those are the kinds of things that we want to be thinking about inside your portfolio so that you're not just saying, oh, I only want to be really safe, because really safe doesn't always bring you the best returns, right? So that's diversification inside your portfolio. But then outside of that, you also want to diversify the kinds of assets that you have. As you know, Black and Latino families lost 50% of their net worth in the housing crisis. Part of the reason for that was that we invested in things we understood, which is real estate and property. And it has been a long time. It's been a very strong sort of asset to own, but we didn't diversify. We didn't have enough in the market. So when the markets recovered, we earned that back. So I want folks to really be able to take a little bit more risk, calculated risk, understand what that means, and to go ahead and do that. I think the other thing is to start thinking long-term about money. We often, because we're sort of, we're working, we're thinking about very short-term things, and really this like intergenerational wealth is about the long-term. So what are the kinds of tools, resources, and financial products that I need to understand to build wealth? So for example, life insurance, both term and universal. Do I have a trust or a will? The last thing you want to do, particularly for a Latino family that might have sort of number of siblings, is to be fighting with people over money that your parents have created, right? So the wealth that they've created. And so how do you protect those assets? So you need to have the conversations early, not only with your family or immediate family, but perhaps with sort of the larger family members. How are you going to take care of your parents? What are you doing to prepare for that, particularly if your parents did not necessarily prepare for their own retirement, right? So those are the things that are going to help us really build wealth. It's going to take a little bit of time, which is why I'm really excited about the opportunity to help so many young people in this journey.
And in working with those young people, and perhaps in some cases first generation, that are having to breach this topic to their parents, to their family, to say, hey, let's talk a little bit about how we're going to protect our assets. What are some of the kind of ways that you think people can introduce? I mean, this is a tricky question, especially when it's not a given that your family will have these discussions, right?
That's right. I say start with your siblings, right? So if you have siblings and you get along and you can approach your parents, that's probably the best way, and say, hey, and do it when there's not an emergency, right? Or there's not a crisis happening. That's probably the worst time to do it. So, even not at Christmas or Thanksgiving dinner, but, so maybe you're having breakfast with your mom. So, oh, mom, what do you have in terms of your retirement account, or how are we planning for you to transition into retirement? We need to make sure that we're covered so we don't get taxed. A lot of people they fear being taxed, so that's one way to enter the conversation, to say we want to make sure that you're not paying more taxes than you need to. And that's a real issue. I always say a lot of sort of retirement planning or legacy building actually has a lot to do with taxes. And so that's an important way to sort of enter that conversation. I think the other one is just saying, look, we really care about making sure that we're protecting what we've built. And we want to make sure that our grandkids and our children and people that we care about have sort of economic opportunity and stability, right? And I think that's really important. I think it's fantastic to see the first generation, at least in my family as well, be able to pass that on, right? Where grandparents are now able to support and to help someone get through college. And I think that's really important inter vivos wealth transfer. So while you're still alive, while that person's still alive, they're able to pay for something that's creating an asset, education, for example, or perhaps you're getting married and someone gives you money to put a down payment on a home. That's inter vivos wealth transfer, and that's really important. It's something that we've been missing, but I think we're seeing more of it.
Now let's talk about another way that you build wealth, and that's through entrepreneurship, which Latinos have been taking plenty advantage of, given that segment in particular is one of the biggest creators of new business, and in particular Latinas are leading the way for that. There was also a report that came out earlier this month saying, from Biz2Credit, I believe, saying that the earnings reported by Latino-owned businesses is actually higher. However, there are a few figures around that, a few conflating figures. So talk to us a little bit more about how getting into the entrepreneurship game could be a way to build that wealth.
Right, absolutely. Well, you've seen in this country that most of the great wealth has been built by entrepreneurs. Because what happens is that you're building value into a company that you sell, and then you get this sort of windfall of money, of cash, and that money is then able to go make money. And so most of the wealthy people in this country make money by investing in companies, by investing in entrepreneurship, and so that wealth is building. And so it's very exciting that we are taking that leap. Now, what we're really focused on is making sure that people are taking that leap and then able to grow that business, to scale that business. And I think that's where we see some challenges, right? So we don't have as many assets to leverage so that we can capitalize our companies, right? And so oftentimes we may not have the kind of assets to get a loan through a bank for a business loan. And so you're seeing a large number of people starting businesses. What we need to focus on now is how to help them grow those businesses, scale those businesses, and to get more capital in the hands of these entrepreneurs. And I think it's a real pathway to building wealth. And for us at our company, I mean, we're really big supporters of really women, Latinos, African American women, to be in tech, right? So I think particularly in tech, because you see the opportunity to actually scale a company, sell that company, and get a really big windfall of money. And so that's the opportunity that's out there. Also, in terms of having tech entrepreneurs, we need to have tech companies hire more Latinos and African Americans in their companies. We've seen that those numbers have not changed at the Googles of the world.
Right, even though reports started around 2014, those numbers have not changed.
They have not changed. And the reason that's important is that if you are going to start a tech company, investors seem to have a preference for people who have worked at big companies. So the ability for you to get more money, angel investors, to get more VC capital is really now you're seeing a pattern where ex-Uber workers, for example, are now starting companies at a higher rate than anyone because they've worked at a company that has grown and scaled. And so that's really important that those numbers increase so that those people can then go out and create their own companies. And then we also need to have more angel investors. And I think that's part of wealth creation is that if I have enough wealth where I feel comfortable, then I have more ability than to write a check to a new company and see that and have some patient capital and see that money grow. And we've seen that with women generally, and I love it. A lot of women who are invested in our company have done just that. And so they're pioneers in that space. And so we really want to see more of the Latino community use that $1 trillion in buying power to really create wealth.
And really support each other and invest in each other.
Yes.
So all very powerful points. Ramona, if someone wants to get started today, they say, you know, this is not a discussion that has been happening in my family, but I want to get started building that intergenerational wealth today, where can they go?
Well, they should definitely sign up for a free account at My Money, My Future. That's My Money, My Future, one word, .co. You can follow us on Instagram as well. We also offer a boot camp course. It's an online course where you can go really deep and learn all of these things. It's an 8-week course. We're really excited. We just launched that. But our free platform will also help you get started. I think so much of this has to do with learning the lingo learning the jargon of finance, then understanding the different products and understanding why and how they're relevant to your life. And that's what we really do. We make sure that we get you sort of informed so that you feel empowered to understand why you need life insurance, why do you need a 529, what's a Roth IRA, and then when you need to make that purchase, you can do so straight from our product. So we make that a seamless experience for you.
Fantastic, Ramona. Thank you so much for joining us and walking us through that.
Thank you.
Nasdaq followers, please stay tuned for more coverage coming to you right here from Nasdaq Trade Talks. And until then, we're signing off.